kind of grateful that the music scene is really alive and well in Champaign-Urbana, because there's not mountains, there's not seaside, but there's lots of music. So I'm happy, and I happen to be a musician, so I'm grateful that that's a very fertile ground.
This is Champaign is Also a Band podcast. One songwriter, one song. I'm Sven, your host for a journey into the music of Champaign-Urbana. Recorded in the Blue Box studio with a songwriter from the Champaign-Urbana music scene, past or present. Champaign is Also a Band podcast is proud to be a part of the Champaign Showers Podcast Network. Welcome to Champaign is Also a Band podcast. Today, I have Sebastian Kelle and Bob Owens. And you may know Sebastian from such bands as Starcruiser, Prairie Sharks, Stray Bolts, Aethernal, Psycho Roll, Lost in Majority, Van Dalton, Disadvantage, DJ Koila, Borderline Cooperation Limited, and, I had it, Moshe...
It's called Moschus
I don't even understand my own notes sometimes. Moschus Oxen. And you may know Bob from his solo project, Rainy Day Loops, and your collaborative project, Active Passive. So, Bob and Sebastian, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Today, we're going to be listening to your piece, Germany, off of the recently released album, Autopilot, or should I call it an EP? It's on that fine line because it's got 4 songs. It's like,
yeah, but it's like 4 10-minute long songs or something,
sure,
right?
Sure.
Anyway, but EP is fine. It was just like done in order to get something out there as fast as possible before we had a gig. So we have something to bring with us.
Well, this isn't your first project. I mean, this isn't your first recording, so
no.
This is just, you wanted to have some new things out there.
Right.
So, without further ado, let's listen to the piece.
Ich verstehe Ihre Frage so, dass es Menschen in Westdeutschland gibt, die wünschen, dass wir die Bauarbeiter der Hauptstadt der DDR mobilisieren, um eine Mauer aufzurichten, ja? Mir ist nicht bekannt, dass solche Absicht besteht, dass sich die Bauarbeiter in der Hauptstadt hauptsächlich mit Wohnungsbau beschäftigen und ihre Arbeitskraft dafür voll ausgenutzt wird, voll eingesetzt wird. Niemand hat die Absicht, eine Mauer zu errichten. Ich habe vorhin schon gesagt, wir sind für vertragliche Regelung der Beziehungen zwischen West-Berlin und der Regierung der Deutschen Demokratischen Republik. Das ist der einfachste und der normalste Weg. dazu entschlossen, heute eine Regelung zu treffen, die es jedem Bürger der DDR möglich macht, über Grenzübergangspunkte der DDR auszureisen. Bitte? Also Genossen, mir ist jetzt hier also mitgeteilt worden, dass eine solche Mitteilung heute schon verbreitet worden ist. Sie müsste eigentlich in Ihrem Besitz sein. Also Privatreisen nach dem Ausland können ohne Vorliegen von Voraussetzungen, Reiseanlässe und Verwandtschaftsverhältnisse beantragt werden. Die Genehmigung werden kurzfristig erteilt. Zuständige Abteilung Pass- und Meldewesen der VP, der Volkspolizei, Kreisämter in der DDR sind angewiesen, Visa zur ständigen Ausreise unverzüglich zu erteilen. Das tritt nach meiner Kenntnis ist das sofort. Unverzüglich.
Welcome back. So normally my first question is always about what came first, the music or the lyrics, but if we're to use the speeches, it's definitely the lyrics that came first. But I want to pose a question that I'm not sure how to articulate, but was there already the inspiration to have a piece of music that was related to these speeches, or was the intention added on or articulated using the words later? What was the first inspiration to like link these two parts together, the music and then these two speeches?
Well, I guess the way the song came into existence is basically experimentation with the beat, and then there was some nice sounding melody and a little bit of trying out a few cool sounds that I had in my mind and, you know, sort of shelved for later, you know, from previous projects. And then I just kind of was lucky to find them again in some folder. And basically then only afterwards came the idea to include some historic recordings that sort of give the song some additional, you know, meaning and, you know, basically also sort of go with the atmosphere of the song. And so, yeah, that was basically the secondary thing that happened. You know, like first the song, like the melody and the music, and then the lyrics.
It's always interesting, the idea of using a historical speech, or there's that intention that exists beyond how it gets used later in terms of this piece. Let's talk a little bit about how you put together pieces in general for Starcruiser. What was the inception of this piece specifically? Like, do you start off usually with a beat, or do you have the bass or other elements, and then how do you, you know, bring in Bob to add to your piece?
Right. So with most of the material, it's mostly like I start something and it's a beat. The rhythm pattern is the first element, which creates basically the groove of the song. So you can like bounce off of that and become creative with a melodic instrument of some kind. Usually I like to do second, a synthesizer that sort of has a chord progression that gives the flavor of the melody and the keys and the chords and everything. Mm-hmm. And then the bass is the third thing that I try to actually play myself as an, you know, sort of like a real instrument, electric bass that I play, and also in other bands. There's like some kind of precursor version of a song. So I bring that then to the other band members or like collaborators and play to them. And then either there's like two things that can happen is like, okay, either we throw it into the trash can right then and there, or it's a maybe. And then we kind of continue to work on it for a little bit more. And then if everybody continues to like it, it makes it into the continued production process.
In the actual process of recording it or even writing it, there's still a certain level of indeterminacy, right? Are you planning out specific, saying like there's a groove that happens for about 2 minutes and then we know to transition? Or do sometimes if you're working on it, you end up extending it to 3 minutes and something else kind of comes out? Or is there a sense of like some static quality to it, or is it pretty varied from performance to performance?
Well, I guess one of the things that are really a defining factor for this band so far is basically the live performance, to keep that in mind, when you produce.
Sure.
Because you want to be able to put it on stage. And so what we do is create a set in a digital audio workstation. We use, at this point, mostly Bitwig for that. So you can trigger the loops individually as you progress through the whole set of songs. I think Ableton is also another one that we try to use some more now these days. But I'm still stuck on Bitwig. So as to your question, how the songs are created, basically it's just one repetition that is basically played over and over again. And there's then some variation to that with the different filters and other elements of the song. Like Bob will play the guitar to some of it, or like a very crunchy synthesizer. I forget the name of your synthesizer here. And then
I've got a few. I mean, right now for the Starcruiser project, I'm gravitating towards some of my more simplistic minimal gear. So I'm using a duophonic synth from Dreadbox called the Erebus. It's like the version 4 or 5. Anyway, yeah.
That's what I call the crunchy synth.
The crunchy. Right. It's crunchy, and then I run it through some glitchy stuff.
Right.
That arpeggio that happens about like 3.5 minutes in, that's not that crunchy synth. I'm just curious how that was constructed and put into this project, because that's, I don't know. It's one of those things that it redefines what I think of as what's happening in terms of the chords in the piece.
That would not be the crunchy synth.
Okay.
The melodic.
I didn't think so, but I wasn't sure how that was happening.
So I could speak to how we're doing things live more. Some of the stuff, like this song, it's in a earlier version where we're going to be adding guitar, and we've been in discussions about adding guitar in some of the things that I'm going to bring. The crunchy synth would be a little more chaotic, so it would, I feel like, would contrast very well. And this is speaking to not what we heard, what somebody would hear in a live setting.
Right.
So
Yes.
it's hard to, yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about what's the typical, should I say, like, pivot when it goes from what you record to when you're actually performing live in front of other people. That's what live is. Okay, never mind. When you're performing live for an audience, how would this piece change when it's brought before an audience?
I would say there's going to be a little bit more undetermined structure. Like, so, for example, each of these different parts and elements of the song, as it progresses, is not completely defined in terms of their individual length. So basically, we just kind of keep rolling on a beat, and then, basically just like Bob brings out the guitar and plays some interesting sounding swells with lots of delay or whatever. And then we have our other band member, Michael, who is a drummer. We don't use as much of the synthetic drums in the live set, but rather the acoustic drum set, actually.
Okay.
And so that also adds a little bit more, live performative elements to the whole experience.
When you perform live, do you sync up with, say, like a click track? When you're dealing with a live drummer versus maybe having prescribed loops,
right?
How is that coordinated? Do you just follow the lead of the drummer, or does the drummer kind of follow? I'm curious about how that works out.
It's a very good question, because we're in the process of figuring that out.
Okay.
I have this idea that I would like the band to be like, okay, we only use the real drummer when we play live and not the samples. And the drummer is more like, hey, let's also play the samples the same time I play. I think in the last gig, we did it sort of like in the middle of the road. So we had the samples play just a little bit lower in volume than the actual drummer.
Okay.
So you'd have to listen really closely when you were in the audience to realize that there's some kind of backtrack of drum samples playing still.
Sure.
But it did work, and people, at least nobody complained about it. And
we're exploring new workflows for this, and like triggers, like having the drummer maybe a trigger on his kick, or he's got like a Roland SPD type of pad or something. But between Sebastian and myself, it's usually he's feeding me a clock signal. Normally I'll have, like, if I do play, I use a lot of Electron gear to dig attacked and stuff. In my Rainy Day Loops project, I use a lot of that. But what I'm finding is I want to be more minimal pairing with Sebastian. We kind of bring a lot of the same elements. So trying to find that space from my perspective. But trying to find a way to bring the drummer in, and the timing is just, I mean, it's a very unique issue. There's not just a real good answer for that, because I can't think of a whole lot of bands that do a super hybrid drummer. I mean, there are, but from a live perspective, it's very different than in the studio.
I'm curious about the recording of Autopilot. In terms of putting it all together and recording it, do you usually were you laying it out track by track, or were you just dropping it in and having the MIDI? Is there anything live that you're actually playing that you're feeding in? Or I'm just curious about how the process of getting that recorded happened.
Right. So basically, the outline is you create a live set for the performance. We had a booked gig, and we wanted to just like have something to bring along to that gig that is a sort of a release that is published. So we have something to show for and pinpoint people who maybe like the stuff and they want to listen to it at home too, right? And then basically what I did is I put the thing in the workstation in such a way that it can then be performed. And then I just did that at home in front of the desk in my little home office and played the thing from A to Z, basically, and I had it record all the tracks. So in that way, then there was this recording of the entire EP right there. Anything else that happened in post was just like, post-production,
Sure.
Mixing it and a little bit of mastering, and not doing a great job with that. We have to kind of get on that kind of part of the game too.
Working on music, any music, I mean, you're hearing it in the mixing stages over and over and over and over. And you have to find that fine line between your burning your ears out, burning your brain out. But yeah, from mastering is definitely, I would agree, like in anything. Well, the last one I did that it went to a vinyl for my project.
The Galaxy Chicken?
Yeah,
or
Galaxy Hen. I
That's
sent that out to a guy in Chicago because I wanted to have it mastered for.
Sure.
'Cause he also did the lathe cutting too for the plate.
Sebastian, I'm curious about the decision to use these two speeches in the context of this piece. I do not speak German. I wish I did. One of the speeches is before the wall was built, and then the second speech is after, or like when they first tore down the wall. Is that correct? If I'm reading this correctly, or if I understood this correctly.
Right. The second speech at the end of the song is basically when the wall fell, and basically the minute the speech was done, then the wall was history, right? And the first one was like 2 weeks before it was starting to get built, in which the head of state said that, nobody has the intention to build the wall, which was completely the opposite of what then was happening, right? And then 28 years passed, and then basically the wall fell after this speech of this then new other head of state or secretary or whatever his role was. So I'm from Germany, and I came to the US about 10 years ago. And so I have this whole somewhat of a legacy in my own past. And I feel that the importance of these historic events are like an example of how, what is the most important thing in German history besides the obvious world wars, right? But that is a good example of something positive to happen. Where you can heal from a great evil that happens to a nation. And I feel like that was just like a thought I had when, selecting these recordings to go into the song, to have some positive like conclusion of the work.
I'm just going to go ahead and tell you what my favorite part of the piece is. I actually really enjoy when you get used to what the bass line is implying, in terms of your brain kind of assumes that when it's playing the notes that it's playing the root of the chords, so you think of the chords, and then when the arpeggios come in, then it's more of like, then you start hearing the inversions of the chords happening instead of it being just major chords flipping back and forth, but also that there's a depth to it because more of the minor is coming in. And I really enjoy when a song can lyrically as well as musically create a sense of we're going to continue to say the same thing in one way, but then recontextualize it with other notes or other words in order to change the context. And so to me, that's a part that I really enjoy. So I'm just curious for both of you what your favorite part of the piece is.
Well, I would say I'm glad it works out for you that way. I mean, it's like not too intentional in trying to make you feel a certain way, I guess. But I think that the idea is to use the minor and the major chords in a balanced way so that a major chord can have a certain melancholy and a minor chord doesn't maybe bring you down too much, you know? So it's kind of a little bit of a balancing act between the two kind of potentially desired effects. I think that with the inversions and all the kind of flourishing with the arpeggiator, so this is the part where I didn't kind of put too much design into it, but I was just playing it live along, you know, it was just like a one-taker. I rely on the mechanical precision of the arpeggiator that makes everything sound good, no matter if you glitch up, you know.
Yeah.
And then, okay, there's a little bit of an element of chaos in there too. So it's not like 100% in key with everything that's being played by the rest of the performance. And that gives it a nice sort of somewhat organic feel, I guess. You know, I had to go in afterwards and just kind of correct the worst mistakes a little bit, which is easy to do because it's all MIDI, right? After the first speech ends, and then right as it ends, there's like this percussive element that starts exactly as the speaker finishes, and it feels like it's been in the background all along somehow, but it's not. It's just like starting there. I feel I did a good job with that part, but I don't know. Maybe it's just the tiniest detail that nobody really cares for.
It's almost as if the static that's generated from the older rendering of this speech, somehow the static dissolves into maybe the clarity of that rhythmic period. I don't know if that's what you're talking about, but that's what it sounds like to me. I enjoy. I'm going to add on to. I love that the rhythm that's being played somehow gets, once the bass comes in, the bass falls into a groove that still fits with what's happening there, but it also kind of carries it. You stop thinking about the one being on a certain spot, and then when the bass comes in, then it's, I don't know, it changes. For me, that also changes. You think the rhythm is a certain way, and then the bass comes in.
Yeah,
anyway.
It feels like it's not on the one when it starts, but it's actually the one. So it's a little bit like, because one of the pad synthesizers that kind of like is this kind of warbly thing in the background, it has a very long reverb trail, and so it makes the rhythm pattern a little bit like a wash kind of thing, sort of like It's a little bit imprecise in that way, it feels like. The beats of the main drum and the bass are perfectly, just mathematically correctly arranged in the song. And, maybe that's the thing that we could even kind of mess with a little bit to make it sound even a little bit better, I guess, because sometimes the mathematics don't actually work with the spirit of the song, really. But I don't know. I don't feel like there's a lot of magic to it in that way. It's mostly just the bass and the drum starts on the one, but it doesn't somehow feel like it feels more like it's in the middle of the measure that it starts, right?
Right.
So, yeah. We can just say it's on purpose.
Sure. Well, I'm kind of curious, and sorry for the tangent here, but I'm curious about how has performing live informed how you write. You originally began Starcruiser with generating MIDI and other elements and recording that or laying that out that way, but once you started performing, how has that informed how you write in the future? I'm reminded when I had a conversation with Melody about her band Thought Crime, which was very much like MIDI driven. When that collaboration began, there wasn't a thought of like, oh, we need to perform these live. So there was a lot of things were written that was like, no, you can't actually do that with a guitar. But then when they started writing some more as a group, the whole group was able to write things in a way that allowed them to play it live more accurately to what they recorded. So I'm just curious if that's something that maybe you've noticed.
I guess from the way that I start working on something, basically just to sort of from the begin to the end, just produce the whole thing. I'm now more and more trying to involve others and to also write, being conscious of, okay, we want to have a little bit of room in the song for somebody else to contribute, you know? Like if we're thinking about like, okay, we want to do some cool guitar parts, then I cannot just like already fill the whole track with, you know, stuff in that range, because it doesn't leave much space for the guitar to do anything that would add anything without kind of completely overcrowding the sonic capacity of what you can do. And then, for example, like let's say the guitar is something that's more in the mid-range of the frequency spectrum, right? Then so I'll focus on doing bass and maybe then something way up high rather than overcrowding the mid-range already from the get-go. This is all like part of the thought when starting to write and to produce. But I also think that I want to be able to share the writing experience more with my collaborators, especially Bob here. But that is still a thing that we need to kind of find out how we best go about it, because like for example, there's like considerations like what kind of setup on your computer do you use to write stuff, and we have to sort of replicate that so we have the same software or something like that, you know, and so we can send stuff back and forth easily. And I find it tricky to, at this point, learn a completely new method, but I guess there's no way around learning new things all the time, right? So it's just something that we just have to take our time to, you know, find those ways. We're still somewhat at the start of everything, you know, like we have started to work together only, I think, last year, right? And the band has existed a little bit before, like it started in 2022 in a different kind of way. It was more like a basement, more heavy metal, like more guitars thing, and that then turned electronic more and more increasingly. You know, at the very beginnings, it was basically a jam band that was just like kind of noodling around. And then somebody had a great idea, and then we would just kind of tie that down a little bit, and eventually it would form into a song after a couple of practice sessions. But there wasn't really a very strong sense of intention for the writing as such. It was more like, okay, we do something and then see what happens, and then we hopefully can replicate it. Right. And of course, when you do electronic music, it's a little bit different because you're already on the drawing board when you start an idea, right? Yeah. And then you can capture it easier and, you know, be intentional about your production process more so than just like improvising, you know, with a very loud and feedbacky guitar or something like that. Yeah.
To go back and answer to riff on your question about as you're producing stuff in the studio, especially electronic music, like how does it inform live performances? It's been a challenge for me as a guitar player, like going from somebody doing something exclusively solo, knowing, you know, what I'm writing and how I want to play it, but then hearing like this song, the bass line and the stuff, it was a little hard for me to think about how to fit into that bass line. I'm finding myself kind of going between major, minor-y types of melodies and stuff when I do play it live. I'm always looking for better ways to manipulate my guitar, not just through pedals, but like live looping and then destroying those, you know, like recording some stuff. And those are some things that I'm looking to do in a live setting. One of the things I'm looking at is like I use an Electron Octatrack. You could do live looping with it. I've the Dig Attack, the new version of it, which is from the same company, Electron. You could do a lot of really intentional things, and like if you run it through a pedal and turn some knobs. But those are the things that I'm looking at as far as like how to inform my live playing to do something nice for Starcruiser. And then the whole frequency range thing for me, it's like you trying to think of where does this fit. Sebastian and I, we do a lot of the same things, like from my project to his, and like thinking, how do I fit myself. We don't want to just go out and throw a bunch of noise at people. The new radio edit, like listening to this song for the first time, I was hearing some guitar parts and stuff. I didn't hear the arpeggiated part yet, and it just kind of really tickled me.
Yeah, that was, I was kind of messing around on the guitar with that, figuring out what is going on chord-wise. It's not super easy to... Well, anyway, it was
he definitely gave me some challenges, man.
Yeah, I just like start in any kind of key, and I'm like not very mindful of the tuning of the other instruments. But, I'm sorry to say. But.
You know, as a guitar player, though, it's almost like you could take that and almost throw a lot of like, you know, theory out and then just play what sounds good. I mean, it's something that's another thing I've been trying to get out of the box and just forget about certain rules, you know.
Right.
I know I'm not the first person that said that, but
no, but but the thing is like you can know that that's something that's possible, but until you figure that out yourself, like you accept that yourself to actually play that way, because that's a hard box to jump out of if you think about music in all the rules. What's your favorite part in this piece?
I think kind of going back on what I just said, I love the bass line. The bass line's just kind of like what Sebastian was saying. It is like melancholy but hopeful. I don't know. It just moves it forward. I really do like the bass line. Like I said before, the arpeggiated part. I was hearing a guitar part before that comes in, then I was hearing like some accents, like maybe, you know, maybe that's where like the guitar could glitch out a little bit and stuff when it going into that, but not overtaking the arpeggiated part. But I really like the bass line, and it's my favorite part.
The question either of you can answer, or however you want to answer this, kind of jump in. Why was this the piece that you wanted to talk about today?
Well, it was mostly somewhat little bit random decision, but then also I was thinking like, okay, which of the songs is something that has more than just music and this has a little bit more like a message as well, you know, like just in terms of making it a little bit more interesting than just being sound. So there's a little bit of a story behind it, I guess, more so than others. I mean, we have this kind of Starcruiser space theme, I guess, you know, where you have like the idea that something amazing is happening, sort of sci-fi like. And then you can sort of picture that in your mind when you listen to the music. That's also a little bit like taking you into space. The title of the song gives you a clue, you know, like what you could like think of, right? But it's just a suggestion, really, right? And so I think the pick for this one, Germany, isn't really a very space-like title, right? But it's more like, okay, this is a country somewhere in Europe. But there is a lot of inspiration that comes from that place in terms of like the Berlin electronic scene, you know, sort of like the way that the whole place is sort of the vibe, you know, like the post-modern industrial kind of way the, you know, big cities there look like. You know, just pictures in my head when I think about, I don't know, they have like a huge dilapidated conference center, this like the size of the Eiffel Tower. It's like out of use, and it just looks like a huge spaceship, and it's sitting right in the center of Berlin, and nobody is there. You know, it's empty.
I think I watched a documentary on
right,
that. That's pretty cool. If you haven't seen it, so check it out. That's
one of the things that I was like thinking of when I was coming up with this idea of the Starcruiser. And well, to be frank, I have to acknowledge that the former drummer of the band named the band, so it was not actually my idea. We were just like kind of then busy fleshing it out with some more backstory, I guess. You know, the selection of the song is something that, I don't know, speaks to the way the band sounds currently, more or less. You know, it's like a electronic band that has elements of some organic and real instruments in it. You know, like the bass, for example, I actually recorded that myself. So yeah, it's not just from the can. But we're not, you know, shy of using samples. We're just like trying to not only use that, and there's always an element that we want to do in the band that also gives it a live performance character. It's not all just programmed, but it's more, some of it has to be performed live by some real person, you know.
Right.
Just to keep grounded that way. And it makes it more interesting too, you know, like there's something sterile about when you have something that's completely prearranged in the computer only, you know. I guess that's an example of how things can sound when you have elements of both worlds.
Champaign is also a band podcast is proud to support Jubilee Cafe. Jubilee Cafe is a free weekly meal program at Community United Church of Christ, 805 South 6th Street in Champaign, Illinois. Jubilee Cafe serves a home-cooked meal from 5 to 6:30 each Monday. Their mission is to feed hungry people by cooking healthy, delicious meals and by serving their guests restaurant-style with servers waiting on tables. Jubilee Cafe is open to anyone who cares to eat with them. Because food insecurity among students is so high, they serve students as well as others in and around the Champaign-Urbana community who struggle with hunger. Meals are free to all and will be served each Monday evening, located in the accessible lower level of the building at 6th and Daniel Streets in Champaign. For more information on the meal or how to volunteer, go to the Jubilee Cafe CUCC Facebook page or email them at jubilee.cafe@community-ucc.org. That's jubilee.cafe@community-ucc.org. Welcome back. So, Sebastian, what is your favorite Champaign-Urbana venue, past or present?
Well, I mean, so there's two different kinds of venues. One is for listening and one is for playing. And for going there to just enjoy a nice gig, I really like the Loose Cobra, not very far away from here in Tolono. Mm-hmm. Amazing stuff, like really something quite different from anywhere in Champaign-Urbana proper, because they play all the, like shoegaze and sort of somewhat harder, heavier stuff from around the area and beyond. And so I really like that kind of, to just listen to, it's not necessarily what I want to do myself all the time, but really like to have something kind of on the more harder kind of music. I really enjoy to listen to and to go and experience live. And in the Loose Cobra, you're basically about a yard away from the stage, Sure. So you really, it's almost like you're right there with the guys almost on the stage yourself. You have to not forget to bring earplugs, but as long as you do that, it's really great to enjoy it. For playing, I gotta say, the Old Bank in Sydney, Illinois, that's like a pub that's in an old bank with a vault door still and everything, and it's just like a small bar pub thing, and they do live music. It's been such a great experience to play there because it's such a friendly and welcoming environment. I should probably mention the Rose Bowl too, because that's really the main place in Urbana where we play also. Like, we have played there with Starcruiser, and I've played in other functions in other bands as well. That is just something that's sort of so well known that I feel like other smaller places deserve a credit also.
Bob, what is your favorite Champaign-Urbana venue, past or present?
As somebody that went from working a lot and creating music in a vacuum, and then more recently, in the last few years, getting out and playing live, and my wife and I have been trying to get out and experience live shows more often, I really feel like the Rose Bowl's been a good place. I always thought the Rose Bowl was just country music for some reason. Yeah. And then I was seeing more of the bands and stuff that were playing there, and then, more recently having the opportunity to play some shows there. I really like that place. I think the sound is good. I think the people over there are cool. I've had the opportunity to see some friends from the Chicago area. Official Clear is one band that we saw. We know them. I know Leroy that's in that band. He was actually a mentor for me, but actually just kind of like that was kind of getting to see some of the bands I like there and playing there, and I feel like that's probably the best answer I have. I did hear, isn't there like a church or something, like an old abandoned church, or not abandoned, but like it used to be a church?
There's on campus, there's something called the Shannon Murray Foundation, and that's a event space where they also do live music sometimes, but it's not actually a like a music venue that has a bar or anything like that. It's more like you just kind of
I've heard several people talk about that, maybe some opportunities to perform there and stuff. So I just thought I'd bring that up because
we should book that place. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, play upstairs at it's the chapel at the Channing Murray, and hopefully they get back into the swing of things. But there's usually like a vegan restaurant, the Red Herring down in the basement. When they were open, they would have live music during the lunch hour as well, which I kind of appreciate when, the music is there to be music, not to be an addition to like the bar scene, right? So like, it's not just about like people hanging out and drinking. It's like people are here specifically for the purpose of listening to the music. So not only does the upstairs at the chapel at Channing Murray sound really great, but it's also set up in that way where it's like it can be an all ages venue. What do you think makes a good music scene? And then also kind of tack on like, what do you think Champaign-Urbana does well as part of that music scene?
Being a musician that I'm really interested in electronic music, and I'd love to see where that can go. Like, not just experimental or ambient, but like electronic music. Like, I love the music from the 80s, 90s. I love old hip hop, and I like industrial. And like, I'd really like to see where that can go in this area and see more opportunities pop up for those types of, projects. I don't think we see a lot of that right now, but I feel like it's starting to kind of inch its way into the scene. I think that was frustrating for me in my personal music project, wanting to find a way, like an on-ramp to play that kind of music. Right. I mean, for starters, like, it's not easy. I mean, unless you're playing cover songs or, or something with words, songs, that's not entirely easy to find an opportunity for that. So I am super grateful for, the opportunities we've had with like the Immersion Fest and stuff since last year. And then this, getting hooked up with Sebastian and Starcruiser. Thank you, Two-Legged Zoo, John McNally. He's the one that hooked us up. I think there's a lot of potential there, and I'd love to see it back kind of make its way back from, being somebody that grew up in, I don't want to say how old I am, but definitely saw, got to experience the 90s.
And it's interesting. We do have like these surges where there's almost like a group of people that decide that they want to have more electronic music. And so they try to, work with booking people to have more electronic music or more experimental or whatever. It always feels like it comes in waves. Like sometimes that's hard to sustain too. Like I think sometimes somebody gets interested and they're like, okay, I want to book all these shows that are focused on this like genre, and then either somehow it's not rewarding enough or you just get burnt out, or it doesn't seem like it's getting traction. It's one of those things where it's like it can't just be one person that kind of picks that up. So I guess this is a kind of a call out to people that may be interested in exploring, electronic music or whatever genre you want to explore. Try to reach out to other people that may be doing the same type of work that you're doing and see if they want to put on a show. And then if you want to see more of that music, sometimes it's like, I hate to say it, but you got to be the one that makes it happen. Not calling you out, but I'm also saying
you're not the first one to say that. And I've heard that from other people. Like, we could sit there and complain or whatever, we don't have this scene, but yeah, it's like, maybe it's because people like us need to start something and put more effort into it.
Sebastian, what do you think makes a good music scene, or what do you think we could do better?
Well, so first, I'm kind of grateful that the music scene is really alive and well in Champaign-Urbana, because there's not mountains, there's not seaside, but there's lots of music. So I'm happy, and I happen to be a musician, so I'm grateful that that's a very fertile ground to do stuff and to meet people and exchange ideas, collaborate, all kinds of things. Stay active, not just get rusty because there's nothing going on. The thing that I'm thinking of is also what I really like and appreciate is that there is a very big welcoming spirit to original music. So when I'm thinking of Starcruiser and the electronic music that we do, which is all original, or at least that's our intention. We might accidentally, maybe steal a chord progression here and there, but not for the lack of trying to be all original. We feel that whenever we play, people are really opening their hearts to that kind of stuff, and it's very rewarding to have that experience that the music that you created, that kind of represents your personality and your spirit of sorts, is really embraced by the community here. The community has its limits. It's still, not a huge city or something like that. All told, I think that the level of, like, for example, think of the Rose Bowl. They have like live music programming, which consists of more than one band every single day of the year, right? And that's like, that's where the bar is. Literally, like bar as in the one that you use for limo dancing. Overall, I'm very happy to be here and be able to do it and to, profit from the really active music scene that gives us so many opportunities that, are hard to come by if you're in a different place. Like, for example, I've lived in Chicago and I played in blues bands as a bass player in Chicago for 3 years. And, oh my God, you really need elbows there. It's just like a really pretty competitive market. That can be a positive thing because the level is really high, right? Like,
sure.
But also you really, really, really like have to be prepared for all kinds of difficulties along the way, like from getting booked to just like getting paid, for example. Like you have to stay to the very bitter end of an evening and then hope that the barkeeper or whoever is going to pay you is still there or whatever it is. And it's just like this kind of stories.
Right. The one thing that I do really appreciate in this area is that we do have some incredibly talented people, but I also feel like the door is open for musicians that are just getting started. Like, they have the opportunity to perhaps open up for a band that's been around for a while, and basically they get a chance to cut their teeth, get a chance to learn what it's like to be on stage, and also be a part of the music scene and be accepted in that. Champaign is Also a Band podcast is proud to support Exile on Main Street. Exile on Main Street, located in the old train station building at 100 North Chestnut Street in downtown Champaign, has been helping to build record collections since 2004. Carrying a wide array of new and used LPs, CDs, and video games. Exile on Main Street has something for just about any music enthusiast and old-school gaming devotee. Exile also hosts regular free live music shows on its stage, so be sure to check out their Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter pages for the up-to-date details on the next upcoming event. Open 7 days a week. They can be reached by phone at 217-398-MAIN. That's 217-398-6246. Welcome back. So, Sebastian, what is your favorite non-musical thing or things?
Well, I mean, it sounds a little bit trivial, but one of my most favorite activities is just doing nothing. You just relax, you just sit there and just do nothing. And it's something that's kind of rare. Like, for example, in my life, where I have a full-time job, and then, there's obviously the music thing, and then also we have a toddler, 2.5 years old. We're going to have another one of those next year. So I think I really get to enjoy the moments the most where I can just like really just conk out and be absolutely inactive. Like I recharge with that. Like I get more, I feel better than before when I did nothing for a little while.
I'm like, so what is your favorite nothing to do?
Well, like for example, sometimes there's like something that I want to do, like for example, just put on socks or something really, really like, meaningless but necessary. If you get what I say. And then you just like pause and you just sit there for 10 minutes staring a hole in the wall.
Yeah.
It feels great. I so enjoy it.
Huh.
I don't know, maybe other people call it meditation, but I feel like meditation already makes it sound so purposeful and organized that I don't really identify with it. It's just like, it is what it is. It's just nothing, you know?
Sure.
It doesn't have more meaning than that. And it's basically, I'm wasting my time. I don't get anything done. Everything gets delayed. Then there's like going to be somebody angry in the household at me because I just did nothing, you know? So anyway, but that's just like an example of how to do nothing when you know, could do something. Yeah.
Love it. Yeah. So Bob, what is your favorite non-musical thing?
So I would say everything. I like to do everything.
Okay, so we've got nothing and everything all at once.
And I guess for me, what that means is I need to be busy, I guess. I'm the kind of person that likes to make stuff, create stuff. Sure. I like to build acoustic panels. I know it's music related. Like, we have kind of a project studio that we've been building in our house since the pandemic. And that is our basement, and now our garage has been completely redone. So making things like custom things to help do things, like trying to think of what a good example of that is. I've been doing a lot of like laser engraving and cutting and making stuff, and that's something I really like to get into. And I've been making stuff for like my music related stuff. So my pedal board is something that a lot of it is what I made myself. The things for my gear, a lot of the stuff I make, I feel like when I go out and I look for things that you know, some kind of utility based thing, I can never find anything that's, you know, cool, or, you know, I always end up making it. But I have a kind of a history in doing like fabrication based stuff, like metalworking and woodworking and stuff. Those are just things I really like to do. Just doing something with my hands gets me away from the computer. I like to do nothing too, though. I do like to, there are times where I just need to do nothing or some kind of mindless activity. Video games are always fun for me.
I was going to say, you should fabricate some useless object. That would be fun. That would be totally like, kind of like, what is it, when you draw in the sand, you know, kind of, you create the shapes or whatever, and then that's part of a nothing kind of meditation. Like, you have something in the end, but it really means nothing.
It takes something that takes no bandwidth to achieve, or finances, or it's just, that's, kind of fun. At the end of the day, that's what people like, things like that. So that's a good idea. Look for it on Etsy.
That's right. Well, Sebastian, Bob, thank you for being on the show and telling me about your piece, Germany, the evolution of Starcruiser, and also your favorite Champaign-Urbana venues, things that make a good music scene, and then also your favorite non-musical favorite things. So I appreciate you both being on the show.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks, man. That's a lot of fun. Thanks for listening to Champaign is Also a Band podcast. This is Bob Owens
and Sebastian Kelle
reminding you, great music is out there. Go find it where you live.
That's a wrap.
Champaign is also a band.
You almost have an NPR voice. It's so good.
Studio South Peter on the inside.
Good to hear I can't wait to hear my own voice in the podcast.
I'll just put a like an octave pedal.
Yeah.
I can't wait to hear my own voice.